Welcome, and love it. Oh my gosh, hi ladies. And yes, we have Kirsten down here on Zoom. COVID, I believe, got you, darling. I know. Oh, hang on.
I tried to avoid it for so long. It's a horrible thing.
Look, this is the world we live in now, isn't it?
It is.
Well, yes, we are here today. We're going to talk about sustainability in, I guess, all its forms. A little bit about fashion and what we can kind of do to all do our part. Because I think we were just talking backstage about, you know, it starts with us making small changes to make a big change. Do you two want to maybe, or three of you, sorry, introduce yourselves real briefly and then we can kind of go from there? Do you want to go, Kirsten, do you want to go first?
Sure. Just to let you know, I can't really see what's going on stage. Oh, that's better.
Fabulous.
Hi. My name's Kirsten Lopez. I founded South Beach Boardies about 4 years ago now, although the story started a long time before that. We make board shorts and beachwear out of recycled plastic bottles, recycled nylon carpets. Everything that we sell is recycled organic cotton. Our tagline is better for the planet beachwear, so we're not perfect. Nothing that we wear on our bodies is perfect, but we really aim to do everything that we do is as good for the planet as it possibly can be, to give people a genuinely sustainable choice when it comes to surfwear.
Sounds great. And
we're based in Fremantle.
There we go. West is best, darling.
West is best.
Yes. Amanda?
Hi everyone, I'm Amanda Healy. I'm the founder of a 100% Aboriginal-owned social enterprise called Kirsten, and we work on a number of different levels in sustainability, including creating sustainable incomes for my Aboriginal artists, but also work very strongly around trying to find sustainable fabrics to make our products in. We've been operating since 2014 and have just come back from a European tour showing our wares across a few cities over there, so it's good to be home.
Great. And Veena, hi.
Hi, I'm Veena Sahajwalla, a professor at the University of New South Wales and director of the Smart Centre Sustainable Materials Research and Technology. And we develop all kinds of materials science, recycling, and engineering solutions for all kinds of complex products. And waste is, of course, around us everywhere, whether it's in our clothes, or whether it's in all the glass and plastics, and the list goes on and on. So I guess for us, it's very much about looking at how we can, in fact, take all of that waste away from landfill and put that into manufacturing. But really also kind of break that myth that just because something's made from recycled content, that, you know, it mustn't be that great. So in fact, this is where it's about the raw materials, but it's also about manufacturing. How do you make high quality products, which means they've got to be engineered to be high quality and they've got to be fit for purpose. And so with everything you make, there's got to be science, there's got to be engineering, testing and evaluation. And ultimately, of course, we all have to love the product, so we all use it. That's amazing. What Smart Centre's all about.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear more. We've had briefly spoke about it backstage, but I'm so fascinated. But I just wanted to start with something you just, about the sustainable fabrics. What actually is a sustainable fabric?
Yeah, I guess there's a very broad definition of sustainable fabrics, but I guess those that are either from recycled products or natural products that have limited impact on the earth. So anything that isn't really man-made from man-made products, such as with base products as petroleum, or oil products, I guess. Am I correct there, Veena, or is there more I need to add to that?
Well, I guess, I mean, yes, natural products, we think about wood-based, right? But you've also got to think about how the manufacturing process itself reduces the impact on our planet. So it's about both the raw materials as well as how you make it. So, because you could have fabulous raw materials like wood-based, you know, fibers, but if in the process of making that, you've ended up producing contamination into your waterways and so on. So sustainability is about both.
Everything, across everything, yeah, I agree. And as I said, you know, like there's a whole heap of different levels of it, I guess, and, you know, yeah, so great.
So With your business,
Yes.
we spoke the other day, and not only are you, I guess, sustainable with the fabrics and stuff you use, but also you want to also have an environmental impact with the people you work with, a bit of a social impact as well. So how does that kind of tie in with your sustainable sort of fashion side, with, I guess, the community aspect of the business too?
So I'm a woman from the Wanneroo Nation, Wanneroo Darkinjung Nation in New South Wales, but I've spent most of my life here in WA. And it's always been quite important to me to give back to my community. As one of the most marginalised communities in the world, in my view, we've been excluded from participating in the economy for almost 200 years. It's an important thing for me to help my people get back on their feet and become I guess, become a part of the regular economy. But it was also really obvious to me very early on when I started the business that the artists themselves find it really difficult to make a continuous living out of their artwork. I mean, it doesn't. You don't have to be Aboriginal to experience that, that's for sure. Art workers and creative workers generally are amongst the lowest paid and least recognised people on the planet. So for me, it was a bit of a no-brainer. They were like, everybody was struggling to make money from their artwork. So it was really nice and a natural step for me to be able to do that and create agreements with my artists and make sure that they received some income from the work that they had produced, not just the one-off sale, but an ongoing every time I
think people sometimes forget that when you're buying something, you're not just paying for the physical product, you're paying for the person who designed it, or the person who, it's their intellectual property that they're selling almost. So it's like a musician would get a royalty on a song they sell. I guess the same kind of thing comes into play with art and fashion now as well, giving that back to the artist.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It is no different to music.
Yeah.
It's just not been as well regulated, I guess. And we're starting to see more and more that there's organisations growing and emerging now that actually undertake that work to make sure that artists are recognised, or their IP, as you mentioned, isn't actually taken from them.
Yeah.
That they get some return from the work.
Yeah, I just studied fashion recently at the North Merchant TAFE, and we did a small section about intellectual property and like trademarking of a design or something like that. So I think people often forget about the artist. They just look at the product more so. But yeah, thanks for speaking about that. And Kirsten, I want to ask you a question about, we talk so much about fast fashion and slow fashion. With the types of products that you're making, what is the length in time it takes to produce a piece of, or a garment out of recycled materials, and like the process from getting, say, some plastic and then the finished pair of board shorts?
Typically, I'm working about 18 months ahead of where I am in terms of the outcome, in terms of sourcing. It's quite difficult. It's very easy nowadays to source recycled fabrics, but it's increasingly difficult to source ethically made through the supply chain, high quality recycled fabrics that people will accept, because no one wants anything that has anything to do with China. And that's a whole other issue as well. So it takes a really long time in terms of sourcing. We make sure that every single element that we include in our board shorts, from the recycled nylon thread to the drawstrings, to the metal that goes around the drawstrings, to the grommets that go in the pockets, to the zips, everything is ethically sourced through the supply chain as much as we can track it. And we can track about 95% of what we do. Our packaging is all recycled. Where possible, we have zero packaging because we want to have as minimal waste as possible. So that's kind of the sourcing aspect. And then working on the designs, because we don't believe that fashion needs to have trends and seasons because we sell board shorts, we feel that if you have something that's on trend, it has a very short shelf life.
Yeah.
And our board shorts last and last and last and last and last and last because they're made out of plastic. So we want to make sure that people are going to get a good decade out of their board shorts, which is not a very good business model, but it's a very good life model. And so we're working on designs that are going to be as timeless as possible, so while being funky and fun. And then we work on the way that we create our board shorts. We have a zero waste strategy with our board shorts, the way we lay them out, the way we cut them. So all of those things takes a really long time to do. So yeah, typically I'm working 18 months ahead, which is why I said I launched the business 4 years ago, but it's been around for a lot longer than that.
Yeah. No, that's interesting that you said the way you lay out for cutting fabric, because that was one thing we learned in the fashion course as well, is pattern making. When you're laying a pattern out on fabric, there's so much excess waste that just lays around the edges of the fabric. So again, it's just little things like that that people don't even think about that come into play. And I think it's funny too, you mentioned your products are made out of plastic, and I think there's this mindset that plastic is cheap, throwaway, flimsy, but plastic actually never really breaks down. It's kind of there forever, and yet we treat it as it is absolutely disposable, which I think why I find your stuff so intriguing.
Yeah.
So again, you're making homeware products and tiles and furniture and all from recycled plastic and fabric?
Yeah, so indeed, and I mean, to pick up on all the points that Kirsten you just made, that we've made so much already that's already come in, that first generation of products. There's no denying we're sending away so much to landfill. In fact, I would almost imagine that if we stopped making the original sort of, virgin feedstock materials, but we actually made them all from next generation, materials, we could probably create that economy that allows us to constantly use recycled content, and we can then innovate in terms of what could be made. And so you talk about innovation and what could be made. Yes, if it is board shorts and if it is all kinds of other highly durable products, but the ultimate, I guess, if you can imagine, is to not just convert it into maybe another fiber, but if you've got the opportunity to diversify, that is really what we're looking at, the potential to use waste textiles as part of our green ceramics. So we've converted our waste textiles, use that in the production of green ceramic tiles, and these green ceramic tiles, and I'll hold up a sample, I don't know if anyone can see that, but the idea here is that the beautiful colors that we get embedded in these green ceramic tiles have come from textile waste. But the point in that is exactly what we're talking about, that if something is no longer fit for wear because it's worn down, so, Kirsten might say, okay, well, after 10 years, those board shorts, they're worn down, they're falling apart. That doesn't mean that those fibers can't be used anymore. It actually means that they can now come back into a whole new form. So we like to call that as that 4th hour of reform. So you go beyond that reduce, reuse, recycle of 3 hours. And when you talk reforming, you can make all these completely different products. But it goes back to that fundamental issue that we've got, whether they are natural materials, whether they are indeed oil-based, and let's accept it. We talk about all of these fossil-based resources, the ones that are already there in our system. We should not be burning it and putting it into landfill. Absolutely not, because otherwise we're polluting our planet. And this is the point that, we want to be able to put that into production. And not burn it, not put it into landfill, because otherwise all we've really done is, whether it's fast fashion or any of these other ways in which we produce our garments and produce all kinds of textile, we need to find many, many ways in which, whether they are our synthetics or natural fibers, how do we find production mechanisms to make different kinds of products out of it? And whether it's about board shorts or whether it's about green ceramics, fundamentally, what we're really starting to talk about here is creating those local economies. And
basically, you're almost recreating a new economy. So
exactly.
You're pausing what the economy is currently doing, and I'm thinking, if we stopped manufacturing for say 12 months and only manufactured with goods that already existed, I think the follow-on effect would be huge. And I think we saw that with the pandemic a little bit. I saw some photos of some places where, there hadn't been tourists for 12 months, and the entire ecosystem in just that 12-month period had been reborn, and it was just to see the change, how quickly it can change.
Well, exactly, spot on to your point that, we then pause.
Yeah.
I mean, you can almost sort of say, the slowing down effect doesn't mean that the economy can't keep bustling. We're just creating
redirecting it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
we're redirecting that economy towards a more caring approach for our planet. And that's really what we're saying, that if we hadn't paused to reflect upon how do we care for our planet better, and also remembering that if we do that, if we don't pollute our planet, also in the longer term, we're caring for our people, because we're creating a far more healthier planet. But we're starting that journey of healing in a way for our planet, because we're saying, exactly to your point, if we're not putting it away into landfill, if we are regenerating our materials over and over again, then in doing so, we're enabling. So like Kirsten could say, okay, after a decade, those board shorts come right back, and guess what? They might go into some other production, right? So it's about all these business models that also allow people to say, all right, I can think about the whole of life cycle of that product. It may live for 10 years as a pair of board shorts, but you know what? After that, it needs to come back into a new form. But at every step, we've got to make sure we minimize the impact on our planet. And we don't take on steps, manufacturing steps, that cause impact on our water or air, or just the pollution effect should be front and center minds. So when we talk about supply chains, and if we ask those questions, are these made from recycled content, and where was it made, and all of those important questions, you're absolutely right. I mean, we will get to that point where we'll say, well, actually, wait a minute, there's more than enough textiles in a broader sense, not just what we wear, but all kinds of industrial materials.
It's going to come to a point where waste outweighs humanity.
Scary.
Getting there
Yeah,
now,
it's crazy. And Kirsten mentioned something which I found really interesting about packaging. I shop online a lot. Obviously, a lot of this sort of stuff is not easily found in Perth, but it always comes it'll come in a post bag, inside a plastic bag, wrapped in tissue paper. There's 4 or 5 layers of packaging on this one thing, and I'm just like, why? And I work in retail as well. I have a retail job, and same, when new stock comes through, it's on a plastic hanger. It's got a plastic sleeve over it. Then there's 10 shirts packaged together in another plastic bag, and I'm just like, the excess of packaging is kind of mind-blowing. So, I mean, how do you tackle that? Do you find there's any kind of customer kickback from not having fancy packaging per se?
I find that I have wholesale customers who don't like that, because even though they love what we're about, which is why they want to stock our products, it's easier for them if things are packaged and they've got a nice plastic hang tag on them, so that the hang tag isn't come. We don't do that. We get a piece of recycled organic hemp twine and we tie it through the grommet of our. It takes longer. It's taken a really long time to educate our manufacturers about why we take longer and why we are a pain in their backside. And even still, I spend probably half of my time educating everybody who we work with as to why we have these processes. And then sometimes something will go wrong. So last year, Christmas time, I was in Rottnest. I came back over to get a of T-shirts that it just had made. Everything about it was amazing. It was a new supply that I was using in India, and I hadn't been able to go and speak with them because of the pandemic, but I had, they'd come highly recommended from an incredible ethical and sustainable manufacturer that I'm familiar with in the UK. Worked with them for ages. They're a social enterprise in that they teach women who have learning difficulties how to make T-shirts. So, you're going to come up with a fair amount of stuff that's not really saleable, but you can always sell that as samples or whatever. Opened up my packaging, everything was, so we have to import fabric into in plastic, but we have one big plastic bag that everything comes in, and that's all nice and neatly folded, but there's no plastic or anything. I opened up the box, and all of my beautiful recycled card hang tags had been attached with a plastic, one of those plastic strings, and I could have cried because I had spent 7 months on this project, and it just all fell apart. And it just shows how I thought I'd dotted those I's and crossed those T's, but everybody just assumes that you want to have this easy plastic durable packaging, and we don't.
Yeah.
So it's not the customers, but it's the wholesale and the manufacturing.
I think you made a really interesting point too about whilst it might take longer to do something, we're kind of living in this society of like convenience. And I think people also forget, like, yes, whilst it may take longer to do something, but that is being done by the human hand, which means you're employing people. Again, the trickle-on effect is different. It's an economy change as well. So I think people's mindsets around convenience is kind of crazy, and I know we all live it. We live in this digital world now where everything's in the palm of our hand, but I just think sometimes just pause, stop, think, change your mindset. So much change can happen like super quickly.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I always think that packaging, so we do very minimalist packaging in our process, and I always use recycled mail bags and all sorts of things, but people really equate individual packs with safety and cleanliness and newness, and even, like I produce beautiful cashmere scarves, and people still want to see them wrapped in plastic inside the little boxes. Why?
I think a lot of times people, they associate buying something within, it's like they're purchasing an experience with the garment, so it makes them feel good. It's, the endorphins of, oh, I'm buying something and it's wrapped really nice, and they get excited over it. When I'm just like, I just want the product and I just want it to work. Do you know what I mean?
But doesn't that tell us something, that people are looking for an experience?
Yeah, they're looking at the wrong thing.
Exactly. We really want something that's serviceable and that we can use, rather than like a quick buzz. But that's what retail has become to everyone, isn't it? It's been
but unless retailers then might say, okay, you can have your whatever beautiful packaging, now just make sure we'll take it back, return that packaging back to us. So retailers then kind of go, okay, we're prepared to take it back, and that is reusable. So
I mean, you see it, there are, like you see it in some of the supermarkets, they have like big containers at the front door now where you can take back plastic wrappers from food items, or, say a packet of chips or something, you can take that plastic back and put it in a bin, and it goes off to be recycled somewhere. But it's good. There's not enough of that, really, and I still can't get over the kickback when they abolished single-use plastic bags at the supermarket. Just the uproar was because I'd been using
the cloth bags
for years, and I just was like, these people, they're just so self-absorbed and self-indulgent in this process of convenience and the me mentality. It's like, we're all on this planet together.
It's the one planet. Used to it now.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. The change has been made, and let's get on with it.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I find really interesting is like consumer trends, and we spoke about like how many seasons a company might release. Like it might be a spring season, a summer season. And I was doing some research the other day, and businesses like Shein and H&M now can have up to 20 plus seasons of fashion lines released throughout the year. And it's just all consumer driven by TikTokers and influencers who they purchase boxes of clothing to film themselves opening it. These haul videos. Again, they're selling this experience of excess, for lack of a better word. So, I mean, how do you find that, like you said, with your business model, where people are buying something that, in theory, is going to last them for 10 years? What sort of customers do you find that come through and purchase from you with that in mind? Yeah.
It's been really interesting, and one of the reasons it's been quite good to be grounded in Fremantle is that I have people who come to Fremantle looking for a different experience that they would look for necessarily elsewhere.
Yeah.
But for my board shorts are not cheap. They're nowhere near as expensive as they should be for what I produce them for. But I try to pitch them at around the same price as other board shorts, so it's competitive, and because I don't believe that ethical and sustainable fashion should only be the privilege of the wealthy.
Sure. Absolutely.
But it is an education to teach people why a pair of ethically made board shorts that are made out of 85% really high quality recycled materials and small batch, because we don't want any wastage, costs more than a $4 pair of board shorts that's made at Kmart. And then I teach people like how to work out how much of that pair of board shorts actually goes to the person who made them. And if that's how much goes to the person who made them, how much did that actually spend on fabric? And so I kind of try to educate people in a gentle way what the cost of fashion really is, and the end of that product, how quickly that product will degenerate, particularly with things like rashes that can just degenerate into microplastics so quickly. Those cheap ones, you can almost see them become disintegrating after the first wash. So with that, and having done it for a long time, now I have lots of advocates who are our customers who advocate for our brand, which is good because we don't do really any marketing. And it's really a journey that a lot of people are on.
And maybe that's the point, isn't it, Kirsten, that, ultimately, as human beings, sometimes we're not aware of all the other consequences. And the price that planet pays for us wanting to buy something cheap is something that people need to kind of really be aware of. The fact that, okay, well, if I actually bought the one item that lasts a long time is a lot better, rather than something that disintegrates and then produces microplastics and therefore, all the pollution problems that go with it. And it's sort of thinking about all that externalities, the cost on our planet, whether it's the microplastic pollution, whether it's that carbon footprint of this whole fashion industry, because carbon footprint is a big part of all of this, I always say there is a cost, you just can't see that you're paying it. There is a cost.
And the cost...
It's not necessarily financial.
I was just about to say the cost might not always be financial. So it could be many other things.
Well, exactly. And also, then what we are talking about, back to that earlier point about resources, right? Because if we know that planet has got finite resources, whether they are oil-based for synthetics or whether they are natural materials, coming from plant matter or whatever the case might be, these are all raw materials, and if we are to respect the fact that we've already, basically, gotten all the stuff out of the planet, including both synthetic and natural, we don't want to just tell ourselves that, okay, it's okay to keep going back to the planet and asking for more. There is only so much the planet can give us. And I think we just have to stop and pause and reflect and go, whether they are natural or synthetic materials, if there is an opportunity to use more recycled content as part of our manufactured products, I think we would all be playing our part by making sure that we are asking for those products that first they should be durable, right? So like to your point, Kirsten, they last the distance, but also the other part about that carbon footprint is promoting and supporting local manufacturers, local industries, and to do that in a way that talks about that small scale production and manufacturing. What we do with our green ceramics is we actually do those in our micro factories that are in regional New South Wales, for instance. These micro factories, again, only do small batch production. There's no excess. People sort of go, this is how much I need, that's what you get, right? And then if it's made from waste, it's done locally. So in all of these cases, what we are really starting to nudge and think about what I like to call economies of purpose. So when we start to say that not everything has to be around the mass production of economies of scale, but if in this case we're talking about economies of purpose, then the fundamental question is, what is the purpose? What are our values? The purpose here is to care for our planet, to care for our people, create those local jobs, use more recycled content. So we're starting to get into that thinking around, a different mindset that says it can be done locally. It can be done in a way where local businesses create local jobs. And the more we start to do this locally, we will actually find more and more ways to innovate in the way we manufacture.
Well, that was another... Oh yeah, go.
Sorry, can I just add one extra thing, just regarding that, like, end of life, or what happens when you recycle it again? One of the things that I really love educating people about is the amount of greenhouse gases that are released from clothes decomposing in landfill. And often that is the element that people have no idea about. So they understand the resource component, they understand the virgin resource component, they understand the pollution of waterways, etc. But they don't understand that when they throw that cheap top from Shein in the rubbish bin, that is going to have so much environmental damage for a very long time into the future. So there are just so many impacts that one piece of clothing can have.
Just because it
Sorry,
was...
I'm such a depressing girl. Blame the COVID.
Right. No, it just goes to show that just because something was made fast doesn't mean it's going to disappear fast.
Correct.
Yeah. And next thing I want to talk about was, you just touched on it very briefly, about using local products, local labor, whatever. How hard is it to sustain the fabrics and the things that you want to use in your designs and your garments to find that stuff locally?
So a few years ago it was quite easy, but thanks to COVID the last couple of years have been pretty disastrous, finding people and resources to make things. I've this year had to return to making overseas, and I make in India, where I find it a lot easier to source sustainable fabrics. So those that, and to my mind, I generally would use fabrics like viscose, which is a wood pulp based, but it breaks down in landfill, because at the moment everything's landing in landfill, in 1 or 2 years, as opposed to polyester, which is a 35 or 40 year prospect. So at the moment it's not easy to find the resources that I need here. I imagine that in the next couple of years we'll see us surging right back in that space, or rather I hope so. Anyway, I don't know, Kirsten, what your experience has been in that space, but I could see you nodding away there when
similar.
It's hard to find. It's just at the moment is really difficult. So we've had to reset everything and look for different ways to achieve things than we had in previous years.
And I guess as a consumer, this is a question I have. If someone wants to recycle their fashion or pass it on, I guess, reuse it, how can we do that?
Well, I think there's quite a few options at the moment, and one of the good old-fashioned ways of doing it is what my sister used to refer to as Vinnie's boutique, to places like St Vincent de Paul or Good Samaritans, and get a second use out of it like that. I think there's still a few recycling places around that transform fabrics into industrial fabrics, like...
Because we all know, we all have, recycling bins in our house now for our plastics and our everyday use stuff, but there's no education around how to recycle clothing apart from donating it so it does have a second life.
Yeah.
But I think also we need to start to think the long-term ripple effect in the economy, isn't it? This is what we're talking about. That the positive side and the plus side of doing it locally, whatever you're using it in its second life, third life, but let's call it just future generations of lives, multiple lives of these materials. So on one hand, if you're saying polyester doesn't fall apart, doesn't break down in landfill that easily, what is the other side of that is, okay, so we should make that last in many, many sort of iterations of generations of products to come. And I guess to me, creating those jobs around, yes, if something's not wearable, let's say after its second life, so, people have had second lives or whatever. If something's not wearable, then we need to start to say, okay, well, can it be converted from fiber to fiber? Can it be converted in some cases? You can take a lot of waste and convert that potentially into pulp, which then can go back into fiber production again. So I think in all of these cases, what we are saying, starting to sort of imagine a future, and it's good sometimes to be challenged. It's like what we have experienced over the last few years with pandemic, that we have realized that supply chains have been impacted. in so many essential goods, right? So it's actually challenging us to say, well, why don't we manufacture those feedstock materials locally?
Yeah.
So if we could take the waste resources, waste textiles, whether they are coming from cotton or viscose of course is wood-based, but in all of these cases, if it's something is wood-based, then that can be converted into pulp and back into fiber and back into production again. So the point is that what we're really saying is that it is about imagining what could go back into the form of raw material, and so therefore should we be asking what could be made from that, right? And I'm not saying, look, everything's possible to be converted fiber to fiber and it's all easy. If it was easy, we'd all be doing it. But the point in all of this is you need multiple pathways to find those solutions. Some things would be easily converted into fiber to fiber, and some things that are not. I mean, that's why we started our journey with our green ceramics, because that's exactly what we found, is that these materials, even though they were no longer fit for wear and they were destined for landfill, a lot of those materials down at the basic molecular level, they're actually pretty good. So, it's interesting, we can see a product in a macro form, and then we can see something right down at the micro level. And when you say, okay, something at the macro level is broken, right? I mean, you look at fabrics to furniture to whatever. I'm using furniture again as another example because there's a lot of fabric and textiles in our furniture as well, right? So again, we have to be open to the idea that when we talk about fabric and textile, just because something's fallen apart at the macro level doesn't mean that those fundamental fibers and molecules are no longer useful.
That's just, I think, something people just don't even think about.
No, and that's why when we started to produce these, the science that we did, we actually call the science of starting to do all of this as micro-recycling. So the idea that you can then take, fibers and, wood waste and take glass and all of these different kinds of materials, and then at the micro level, you're reforming it, because the point is, you can actually make a completely different product out of it. So I like to think of this as, when it's no longer fit for humans to wear, your walls and your floors and your furniture can wear these green ceramics, right? But the point, therefore, is that materials, really what we're saying is, they really never die. Let's not burn it and bury it. And I think, Kirsten, to your point about greenhouse gas emissions and all of that is absolutely spot on, because if something's going to break down in landfill and emit carbon emissions, then that's not what we want. But if you keep it in that solid form, where you capture it in the form of a solid product, whether it's clothing items or furniture or other products, I mean, our carpets, and the list goes on and on. Look at all these beautiful curtains behind us, right? So you can imagine a future where we would be looking at all kinds of input materials, and we'd be going, okay, well, what are the pathways to manufacture those? And taking inspiration, of course, from these amazing women who are on the panel with me to really sort of say, look, there is an opportunity here for local businesses.
And you don't even have to rebuild the fibres. I'm just looking in the audience here, and I see a young man who started a business called Sense of Direction Apparel, and he takes old T-shirts. Am I correct, Tyson? Yes. And turns them into, like wonderful new products by, rebranding them and selling them. And, we've got here Deadly Denim, who recycles denim all the time and sells that as a new product with a different twist. So it doesn't have to be that far. There can be a much, lower level or less investment in time and energy in recycling products as well. So I guess there's
multiple layers.
Such a big range these days.
Exactly. Depending on the nature of the material, the state in which it is, and that kind of life and the durability of the product and its application. But I guess that's exactly where creating that local supply chain and regional supply chain of materials would be pretty amazing, because everyone in that supply chain could then find a way to connect, and we'd be able to support each other in creating and encouraging more and more entrepreneurs to really kind of play their part. But I guess it's back to that point, is that, I guess, the beginning of a whole new way, of a whole new economy that we perhaps are now starting to think, because COVID sort of taught us that sometimes supply chains, when they do get disrupted, and we are in the
convenience is
Disrupted
taken away.
Ideas Festival.
So one thing that I'm kind of taking away from a lot of this is really education, educating ourselves. But I mean, what sort of responsibility do these corporations have that are mass producing this fashion, and the corporate greed that goes into it? And it's like, do they have an ethical responsibility to be not only educating themselves but also their consumers and customers?
Well, I personally think they won't educate themselves until people start to vote with their dollar.
Yeah, for sure.
That's my view.
I
guess
agree.
that
Yeah.
the power is with us still in
Anything.
in determining the direction of where we go and all sorts of things, huh?
And that was another interesting thing that Kirsten said about sustainability shouldn't be an elitist thing.
Yeah.
But it is, because we find that 9 out of 10 times something that is locally made or sustainably made is going to be far significantly more expensive than buying a $5 t-shirt from Kmart. And, so...
But then it's also about us questioning our habits. Do we need to buy $5 t-shirts, or do we need to buy one for $25, right?
I say this to a lot of people in my retail job who they want to come in and buy a pair of shoes, and I'm like, well, you can buy a synthetic shoe that's going to be $50 and maybe last you 6 months, or you can buy a leather shoe that is probably double the price and it's going to last you 10 years. Because again, it's... again, buying cheap for the sake of buying cheap is not always better in many instances.
Yes.
In all sorts of ways.
I guess as people will realize, as we're having more of these conversations, that what is good for the planet is also going to be good for our people. We're going to be creating those local jobs and empowering people who may start to think about, yes, of course, we have to be able to create those jobs, and we have to be thinking about how sustainability can empower, the birth of a whole range of new jobs and new supply chains, where we're valuing our resources, and things that we would have just put away into landfill, we're challenging that notion. And to me, again, it's the point that, I do hope that in the future we'll be looking at what we've all been throwing away into landfill. And I've no doubt there's probably a whole lot of textile waste in there, apart from electronic and other kinds of waste, and going back and going, what, actually, these are some pretty good resources that we need to have another think. It's a whole kind of shift in mindset, which means that local and more ethical ways of sourcing our raw materials will encourage more people, whether you're in the world of science, technology, business, retail, commerce. There is that connectivity, which I think is so important and really amazing. I know with some of our products, we've had designers who've come and had a look at these, and we just get blown away when we see their reaction, because we've just designed and made these to be obviously from an engineering point of view, to have all the right properties, to be really strong and all of that. And then it's amazing when some of the designers have a look at that and go, oh my God, that's so cool, and love the texture, and love this and love that. So I guess it's about also supporting each other, supporting ways in which businesses of people who are really looking at ways to improve the state of our planet. And I'd like to think that we are on that journey, if we all work together, on the journey of depollution. Can I say that? Yeah? We've been too far long polluting. Can we depollute?
Yeah. No, it is. We've touched on this a few times, but it's about taking back things that already exist and reusing them instead of just landfilling them all.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm so curious about the products you make. I have to ask more. What is actually in it? So what sort of fibers, fabrics would you use to produce a tile like the one that you've got there?
So I'll talk a little bit later on in the afternoon in the keynote.
Yeah.
So gotta
keep it short and sweet for us.
But the idea with green ceramics is, of course, we want to be able to take, and it started our industry partner, in Cootamundra in New South Wales, has a tiny business, and he was basically someone who's collecting waste mattresses, for example, right? So in that journey of sort of collecting waste mattresses, of course, we know that the actual springs, the steel springs, are recyclable, but all of that mattress flock was something that he really couldn't use. So when our partnership started all those years ago, I mean, I find it quite amazing now when I think back on the days when this was a conversation where he'd go, "What? You can make these from waste, that comes out of my mattress flock and all this other textile waste?" Anyway, so I guess the point in that story is that it started from literally that journey that said, let's analyze those materials, let's see what's in there. When we understand properties of what's in our waste textiles, and we've of course got a whole range of different kinds of waste glass we're looking at as well. But if we can then say, okay, well, there are all these different materials, let's not just assume that all textiles are the same and all glass is the same, because they're not, right? And of course, in any complex product, there are many different kinds, because I mean, in a mattress, you might have what's inside, what's on the top, the fabric, and again, we know textiles are blends and all of that. So it's complex, but that also gives us an opportunity to say in what different applications could we put it in. And so our ability to then, apply that thermal transformation, and in that thermal transformation, I'll give away a little secret, because people assume that because it's got waste glass in it, that, oh, but we must be smelting that glass or something. We're actually not smelting glass at all. The temperatures that we use to manufacture these are much, much lower. And of course, the secret lies in the fact that how these two materials, very different materials of glass and textile, come together and create this highly encapsulated product that then has to have all the right properties, right? If you want to put something in your floor tiles or wall applications, it's got to be engineered to do that. So it's not just about, well, if I take a bit of this and a bit of that, it'll be fine. It's all of that research that then allows us at the micro level to recycle the two together. So the complexity in these two materials also gives us the positive, because often we tend to think that, everything has to be absolutely perfect in the way we source it. But what we are really saying is sometimes if there are blended materials, and that's why in this case we're using hybrids, the hybrids actually work really well together. And so there is all of that, fabulous science that, needs to underpin and provide that foundation. And I guess that's the reason why, of course, now we're diversifying further. We had a company in Sydney who said, oh, I've got all this waste wood. Typically, all this waste wood, leftover sawdust and stuff from furniture would just get burned. And we were like, we looked at that beautiful wood, just waste wood from manufacturing. So they're basically saying, oh, can we set up a micro factory where our waste wood now becomes part of...
So you essentially would be partnering with that business to provide them
to help them with the science, and then therefore some of that timber waste, and then bring in textile waste. So they're in essence becoming responsible for their own waste. Exactly, spot on. Yeah. And this was really just, it took all of us by surprise. Yeah. Because when we were walking through their factory, we loved all the beautiful furniture and other items they were making from wood. And as we were seeing all of this waste that was collecting around, and I happened to ask, what are you going to do with all of this beautiful sawdust? Because they were so beautiful in the way they were collecting their waste. They were really respectful of the material. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're putting in all this effort in collecting it. And I think that's where sometimes it's that mindset of the fact we've started with respecting our materials. We know it's not a waste. We know it's a valuable resource. Now let's collaborate and let's partner and let's come together to find solutions.
I'm so fascinated by it. I love it. Should we do some audience? Has anyone got some questions? We've got time for Q&A. Right down the front, straight up. Oh, we're going to grab a microphone for you, darling. 1 second.
Good afternoon, panel. I was actually reflecting on what you were saying with regards to respecting the fabric and the manufacturing process and the fact that we no longer have seasons. Perhaps one of the things we could do is maybe find a way to get back to fashion seasons, which would actually give designers and artists and manufacturers a time to breathe and maybe even make a better product. But more importantly, for those people who do want to actually recycle their fabrics, there are sort of like the upcoming recycle communities that are actually springing up all over the city, where they bring their stuff along and they even go as far as swap shops. On top of that, the most critical thing is for those people who do want to actually reuse fabrics, the problem is if you bring it to, say, a seamstress or a designer, most people don't want to pay it. They want it for free. If you say that I can actually, say, repurpose your wedding dress or your evening gown or your day suit, they assume that you're going to do it for nothing, and because of that, they're more likely to throw it in the bin. What kind of solution can we actually look for when it comes to that?
As an artist, I hear that every day of the week. Oh, can you come and do this for us? Oh, you want that much money to be paid? Yes, this is my job and I'm providing a service.
But the exposure.
Yes, exposure pays my rent. It's great. No, that is an amazing question, and I think there's so much depth to it. For me, I think it's about people respecting what the other person is, the service they're providing, really. And we touched on this right at the very start, like how undervalued arts and creative industries are. And I think we've seen that more than ever in the pandemic. You know, a lot of artists, myself included, were out of work, pushed to the side, were left out of government fundings, but yet what was everybody doing at home when they were locked inside? They were consuming entertainment and art through Netflix and Spotify. So again, yeah.
And I think we have to relearn a bit about this, what the actual cost of everything is. So, you know, we're all buying $3 t-shirts from Kmart or whatever. Well, actually, that isn't sustainable at all, and we actually have to talk more about the real value of that t-shirt. If you're paying everybody properly along that process, is probably closer to $30 or $50 even, you know, and that's what a t-shirt is worth.
I also think people knowing their worth. This is just an example that a musician I'm working with, I said, oh, I've got this event, how much is it for you to come work this event with me? And he said, oh, whatever you think I'm worth. And it kind of broke my heart a little bit, because I was like, no, I'm wanting to pay you. Like, I'm asking because he's a fantastic musician. And I think a lot of it is knowing your worth and knowing what you're providing, and I guess demanding the respect of the customer or whoever it is to say, yeah, you've kind of got to stand up for yourself a little bit. And if someone is going to try and get you to do something for free, it better be worth it.
Well, you know, another sort of perhaps something that you can use, I mean, whether we're repairing our clothes or our shoes or our, you know, items, electronic items or whatever, perhaps the thing we all have to start to maybe use, you know, phrases like, hey, you know, see me as your environmental savior. If you want to do the right thing for the environment, because everyone says, what can I do? What can I do? Right? And in a way, by repairing items so they are fit for reuse and extending their lives and, you know, making items more durable and giving it that extended life, you're effectively helping people, you know, contribute in a positive way to our planet and not throwing that away. So I guess, again, you know, what is that worth, that service?
I think another thing, again, touched on very briefly, being community. If you just say, for an example, you can't afford to pay someone to do something for you, then, you know, exchange of, you know,
The old barter system.
Yeah, the old barter system. Like, absolutely connect with people in your local community and say, hi, you've got this, I've got this, let's help each other. And again, you're cutting down on environmental footprints, costs, a whole, you know, ecosystem of things. Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah, I think don't be afraid to have conversations around that, for sure. But great question, love it, thanks. Anyone else?
Hi, ladies.
Hi.
I thought the topic title was a bit weird. Sustainability as being revolutionary. I think personally, sustainability is a form of consciousness that we need to evolve towards, and evolution is part of nature. Revolution is one of the poorer parts of human nature. Thank you. Would you like to comment?
No, I think you said it perfectly.
Look,
Absolutely,
yeah.
it is about people's consciousness and changing the way they think, and evolution, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The comment I'd make, I have an Aboriginal background, and our people have lived in harmony with the planet for 50,000 years until 250 odd years ago. It really is part of our Indigenous nature, and what we really need to do is look more closely and carefully at how our Indigenous people manage this earth, and why not, consider, no, we're not going back. We can't switch everything off and return to the life that used to be, but it's certainly worth exploring lots of the processes and practices that Indigenous people use for thousands of years, and apply those wherever we can. We're growing crops in Australia that were never designed to be in this country. We fill the land with fertilisers and water and whatever to make it work. Really, is that what we should be doing anymore? I don't know.
Should versus could, or would.
But yeah, great point.
Oh, yep, over the back.
Oh yeah, just on the dilemma you pointed out about buying a $5 item from Kmart versus maybe a $50 item that's much more sustainable. Maybe people would like to buy the $50 item, but they can't afford the upfront cost. So maybe this question's already answered by all these financial apps, but do you have facilities where people can kind of pay progressively so that they can get the savings progressively as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, we've got things like Afterpay, and I guess most businesses are sort of using that. But again, I think, we need to take away this almost elitist attitude, so that, people who aren't as financially frugal can be conscious consumers, I guess. But again, how do we, how long's a piece of string with this, but it's like, how do we then bring down costs of sustainability to match these fast fashion? Is it doable? Is it doable to make sustainable fashion or items at a lower cost or at a similar cost to the fast fashion type of stuff? Do you know much about that, Kirsten?
It's really expensive. To be honest, to create ethically made sustainable garments is expensive. I certainly understand the issue of cost. I have 4 children. I have 4 sons, and they go through clothes like nobody would believe. And it's something that I speak with my customers about often. It's always been really important to us that we have some things that are affordable for grandma who has got very much money but really believes in sustainability and wants to be able to buy her grandchildren something that will set them on their journey. So for us, because I'm small, I always have sale items in every size, and we have inclusive sizing. So we go all the way up to a size 44 down to tiny. We also have non-gendered clothing, so that people can, even if they can't afford to have choice of everything in our range, they can afford to buy something in our range, knowing full well that all of the grandchildren will end up passing it on. The reason that all of our kids' stuff is unisex is exactly that reason, because it's a lot. If you're paying $50 for a pair of kids' board shorts, that's a lot of money for a kid who's going to wear it for one season. So the reason we do everything unisex is so you can pass it down to the next child coming along, or to your neighbour, or to their cousin, or whatever, so you can get the mileage out of it, which isn't so easy for that first person spending the $50, but hopefully it does create that community of like-minded people who understand that the way to sustainability
Absolutely.
is by sharing resources.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. Community, sharing resources, and the old hand-me-downs. If you have something that you're no longer needing or using, and it is of high quality, and you know someone who may benefit from it, I mean, some people may be too proud to accept that, but on the same token, I'm like, we should be sharing and, helping out other people, why not? No, great,
Yeah, it's
great answer.
far better for that item to be out there in the world being used than to be in your cupboard for 10 years.
Perfect. I love that. Great. Next question. Hi.
Hello. Thanks for the discussion. I guess it's a question for everyone on stage, but I guess there's a big focus on the future and investing in a future. I guess the question is, what sort of things are we doing today that are, I guess, directly investing in, say, our future, specifically like younger generation? Are there ways that we can generate discussion with people who are younger or people who are currently going into schools? Should we have more of a focus on STEM and specifically researching in sustainable fabrics? I guess, do you have any thoughts on this?
There is no question that, the role that STEM will play, and particularly as we see, younger generations coming through. I mean, I was at an event just yesterday in Sydney, and I had one woman in the audience telling me that I think it was her 4-year-old daughter watching Play School, because there was a segment that I had done on explaining green steel on Play School. And I think, let me tell you, that was the toughest gig I've ever done, trying to explain that. But it was just so heartwarming to hear that, the mum was there telling me about the fact that how much her daughter enjoyed it, and the fact that this was now at that level where STEM and the conversation around environment and sustainability is clearly being taught in schools. Kids are made aware of it, educational programming, and of course, parents playing an active role in also, raising their own awareness. Maybe if they're not aware, then perhaps, yes, sometimes, I don't know, a lesson on Play School with your 4-year-old may be a good thing, right? But I guess the point in all of this is that, you're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head there, that we have to have more of that awareness that the whole conversation on sustainability is not just going to happen. We need a lot of new science and technology, and to be able to take what we are doing in Australia, produce that foundational science. I've got incredibly amazing collaborators here in Curtin, and in fact, I'm going to catch up with them later in the evening. And it's all about ultimately recognizing that through collaboration and working with, I guess, businesses who are keen to look at where new science can go a long way in terms of sustainability coming in as part of the thinking. These are not decoupled things, and we don't always have to assume that, growth and selling more stuff is the only way to improve economic outcomes. What we're really saying is that we need to kind of decouple the two, that, you can have sustainability, and you can still deliver economic benefits along with environmental benefits. But to do that, as we've been talking about, you need new ways in which you can think about creating new opportunities for jobs and for markets. I mean, we talked about repairing, so bringing in some of those new skills in terms of remanufacture, regeneration, repair, reuse. I mean, there are all these things that we've talked about. Now we need to start to value that service. I think the point that you made earlier, we need to value that, and education.
If I could just speak up as a HASS teacher. So I, as well as running my business, I also teach HASS, which for people of my generation and older, we would call it social studies. It is widely taught in high schools. I teach at a local Perth high school. In HASS, sustainability runs through the entire curriculum, which is fantastic. So whether I'm teaching history, civics, economics or geography, I have the privilege of getting to educate teenagers who are so ready to make change about the impacts of all of these things we've been discussing. So I definitely think it is part of schools. I don't think it's something that needs to happen. It's totally supported by the Australian curriculum, and it's very inspiring to see. It's just that, does that learning, which they have and they're super passionate about, stand up to the TikTok influencers with their packaging videos? That's where I think we have the the lack of alignment,
Disconnect,
because
yeah.
they're really passionate about it in class,
Yeah.
but then they're also obsessed with their bargains. So.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say something around that education and conversations. If we look around the room, how many empty seats there are here today. Imagine if all of us had invited one extra friend, one extra family member who may not have ever had any sort of conversation like this around sustainability, because, you know, we are just constantly bombarded with news and, you know, this is one tiny piece of our life. But I think, you know, just come and spend an hour with a group of people that might be talking about something that you know nothing about, and you could learn something completely new and just go home and make those changes yourself.
Yeah.
Another
Yeah.
question?
I love that. That's just a great rule for life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, all the points that we've talked about around awareness and education and kids are learning it and all of that. So I guess the ability to, yes, as much as we talk about the influencers that we're not too impressed with, but we all, in our own ways, within our own family and friend circle and communities, can be positive influencers. And I think, to me, that's where, you know, we need to play our part, which is clearly what you know, we're all here doing today, is having this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Our world is changing and advertising is having less and less impact. But there's a lady up here who had a question as well.
Hi, my name's Sunmi. Thank you very much for this conversation. I wanted to respond actually to the gentleman who brought up that the title was a bit weird. I would actually argue that it's not, that we're talking about sustainability as a revolution because it's necessary as a rebuttal to the Industrial Revolution, and we need quick change around how we look at sustainability. I think the use of the word is apt here, and we need to have conversations about disrupting what the status quo is, and the status quo has not been sustainability. So that was my point, but my friend had a question here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to the panel for enlightening and educative session. And as you said, obviously I feel like a lot of people need to hear this. And in this age of social media where, you know, sometimes you're invited to a function and I think a lot of people can relate and you go like, oh, what do I wear? Like, that's the first thing that comes in mind. And then the other thing is, like, you look up online and you've, you know, for some reason you Googled something and allowed your cookies to be, allowed the cookies on. And then the next thing, you're getting all these bombarded on your social media. And we know that the psychology behind, you know, the fashion is that every time you see a dress, you're like, I want it, but I don't need it. And then the more you see it, the more you think, okay, I'll just buy it. So we have all these clothes that we don't actually need, and then we end up just having them, storing them in our wardrobe or whatever it is. So I guess then my question to the panel is, how do we stop that, like, from ourselves, from that psychology of every time I go to an event, I need something new, and just having that contentment in recycling the clothes that we already have. And it's good that even in Hollywood now that the celebrities are recycling clothes on the red carpet, which is pretty cool. But then we still always have these social media posts, and especially if you're an influencer of any, like, people also want to see what you're wearing. That's part of the package. And so we're always going out to buy new clothes, and we all know that we don't need them, but we actually do get them. And then my quick second question was, we have, you know, like, for me, I have those clothes that, you know, they've been there, and I kind of don't feel like I want to take them to the good Samis, because some of them have worn out, and I don't know what to do with them. Like, do you throw them in the bin, or do you burn them, which is also bad for the environment? How do you navigate around the clothes that you really don't want to take to these stores? Thank you.
Gee, that was a big question.
I would say abolish influencers. And my work does take me into that field occasionally. So I guess I see both sides of that a little bit. But I think that there is absolutely an ethical responsibility for these companies, the way that they do target these advertising with internet algorithms, and clicking on something then forces your Google browser into a whole other, but the sad thing is we've all agreed to this by ticking terms and conditions of these apps and stuff that we don't actually bother to read. So we're basically giving them the permission to do so. So yes, I think it's a bit of a responsibility on the companies and also us as consumers to just, I guess, turn it off, ignore it, like willpower.
Yeah, that's the beauty of those little, square things that we've all got now that are, you can put them down. And I actually don't follow influencers. I do like to look and see what other people are doing, but it is a hard one, particularly in such a busy environment. Now, there's a couple at the front here that have had their hand up a number of times to ask a question. Just here, this gentleman in the white T-shirt in the second row.
I have one. Thank you. Hello. I'm Faith. Nice to meet you all. But I was thinking about the cost of the shirt that the guy mentioned earlier, that Kmart shirts cost $5 and the sustainable ones cost $50. And I think that our grassroots activisms and our brands, creating stuff. I have my own Etsy page, upcycling broken jewellery. I think that's really good, but I feel like maybe governments should perhaps take a step, perhaps subsidise our products so that it costs less for the consumer. So it isn't always just, because slavery will always be cheaper than paying people. And unless there is financial incentive to change, or even we could tax the more expensive stuff, tax the cheaper stuff, tax the stuff that isn't treating people fairly. I feel like it's not our responsibility necessarily. I don't know if we can drive our prices down because we're paying people, or if we need to drive their prices up or be subsidised to help the average consumer buy it.
I mean, well, why not we subsidise things like healthcare and medications, which are for the good of people, so why not subsidise things that are for the good of the planet? Yeah.
It is interesting, and as I've said a couple of times, I am, of an age where I've seen a number of changes in our community, and certainly in the last 10 years, it's becoming much more prospective to me. I can see people are so much more aware of the need to change and to make change in all sorts of areas, like things like racism that still exists we really should not be tolerating that anymore. It's way past time. This is, for heaven's sakes, 2022. Though, this idea that everybody is, has a gender and has to stay, like this gorgeous thing here beside me, or, I think that adds so much colour and beauty to our world. Why would anyone,
Some might call it a monster, but that's okay.
We are changing. Is it fast enough? No. Is it enough? Probably not. But it's certainly better than it's ever been before. So I personally am feeling very positive about our future.
I think we've got one more over this side somewhere. We are out of time, so if anyone wants to jump in with one last...
Sorry, I was just quickly putting my question.
Go for it.
So I really enjoyed the conversation and hearing what you guys are doing in a macro level in terms of your companies and really reforming these materials, which, is doing a great part in terms of, creating sustainability. My question is, I guess for the individual on the micro level, besides in investing into recycled or reused clothing or buying, I guess, more sustainable items, how would you guys encourage people to take that responsibility on a micro level and be sustainable in terms of our consumption, and how we can really contribute to
creating a more sustainable world and waste-free world?
Yeah, look, I mean, the realities are all of those actions, you're right, start at that basic human level, right? We're talking about what we do in our homes and how we actually make those decisions. So even something as sort of fundamental as what we're talking about here today, purchasing clothing items, to do a bit of that homework before you make that choice to purchase, I think is important, because I think in all of this, the one important question that if manufacturers have got nothing to hide, then their supply chains and the choices that they're making in sourcing their materials should be completely transparent on their website. So to me, it's also about us as consumers, doing that homework ahead of those purchases. And I bet you that's going to help us reduce our impulse buying. Because if that's the principle we live by, and we say, no, look, everything I do is going to be based on myself informing the choices I make. So, you're not out there just making those choices to purchase because you happen to be in a shopping center or whatever, but rather to be able to say, no, I won't buy something till I've actually done my homework and looked at the questions around the supply chains. Where is it made? There's a lot of, I guess, website information which actually, addresses standards for recycled materials, so RCS, recycled claim standards, and so on. So there are standards that are there that one can have a look. The question, of course, is I do agree, it's extra work. You've got to inform yourself. But I think once you get used to doing your own checks and balances, I think I compare it very similar to food, right? When you consume food, you're very careful in terms of what kind of additives go into certain food because you're conscious of the impact on your health. But much in the same way, if we slow down the rate at which we purchase by, informing ourselves, doing our homework, I think to me that's going to make a big, big difference in the choices we make. Because of course you've got to be supporting, the right businesses so that you can promote and encourage more of the kinds of businesses. The amazing examples of these incredible women we've been hearing today are those kinds of examples that we should be supporting and encouraging, so that when you do go in to make an online purchase or in a store or whatever, you're actually saying, no, I actually do need to find out where is it made, how is it made, what were the kinds of materials that went into it, and if I am, of course, paying a little bit more and I can't afford it at this point in time, then perhaps I need to, as we were saying before, cut down the number of items I buy, but buy limited. And I guess it's back to that point where back in the days, I was born in Mumbai and grew up there, and for us, getting a special outfit on your birthday was the special moment in time where that's what you got, and you cherished it. And I guess so to me, we need to bring back maybe some of those values where we do see that gift, if grandma's given you a birthday present or whatever, or a toy that someone's given you is a special thing. And I guess I wonder whether part of that is also around the values that we hold. And when we are teaching kids, whether it's through HASS or STEM or whatever, but fundamentally there are core values in there, part of what we are really trying to teach future generations. And I think to me, the more I see how young people are taking more of that sense of responsibility, there is hope and optimism in there. And I think to me, that's just how we as family and friends and communities influence kids and future generations
slow fashion
to think in
and
a way.
Slow purchasing.
Absolutely, slow fashion, slow purchasing. Spot on.
We are out of time, but I believe there's one more we were going to get to. This young lady. Let's go for it, babe.
One thing that me and my friends do is we have seasonal clothes swap parties. I'm from Freo, and we're really, really conscious of what we buy already. Some of our clothes, almost all of them, have been going through our friendship group for 6 years now. And it's a totally different experience seeing your friends wear the clothes that might have been sitting in your cupboard rather than taking them to the op shop. Like a jumper came back to me the other day and I was like, oh, I love this again. And I put it in there probably 4 years ago. And it's also a really good way to see your mates, and we just honestly, those clothes have been going in our friendship group for probably up to 6 years now.
We just did the same thing.
So good.
Last weekend, actually. So we got together a group of drag queens, a group of burlesque performers, and had a costume swap meet garage sale. And yeah, I sold a costume to a friend of mine, and they were on stage the other night, and I was like, it looks amazing on her. Like, it's sitting up in my cupboard going to waste. So yeah, absolutely, I'm all for it. Well, that's it, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Round of applause for our panelists. And yeah, thanks so much for being here. Is there anything else we need to, we're good? Well, we'll see you all later. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon.
Thank you.